So welcome to another edition of the Go With John show. Today we have with us Teresa Schudel. Welcome, Teresa.
Hi, John. It's great to be here today.
Great to have you. So Teresa, you're in the title industry, but tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay, great. I am a Virginia attorney, and I'm also the regional director of RGS Title. We are a company that has a footprint of the entire Mid-Atlantic area.
Okay.
I do settlements, and I'm based in McLean, Virginia.
Right. Real estate settlements.
Real estate
generally.
settlements, residential as well as commercial.
Okay. And so what did you do before you got into the real estate industry?
Well, I've been in the real estate industry for a very long time. In fact, when I was at law school, I put myself through by sitting at new homes in trailers for Long and Foster.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So I guess tell us. So we're here today to talk about easements.
Yes.
Is the purpose of our discussion. And so give us a broad overview. I guess what is an easement when it comes to real estate?
An easement is what we do is we do a title search. And when we do a title search, we see what is recorded in the land records for that property and what is attached to the property. So an easement that is recorded would be something like a utility easement so that the property has a utility service.
Right.
Or it could be something that the Colonial Pipeline is running through and there's a recorded easement for that.
Right.
Or a common driveway, we hope, has a recorded easement.
Right.
And so what we do is once we get the title search done, a title report is done along with a title commitment, and it's an outline of what is attached to the property in the land records. So when a property is sold, everything that's in the land records, like an easement, goes along to the next buyer, whether or not that buyer knows that it's on the property.
Right. So you said a lot of things there.
Yes. Sorry.
No, you're fine. So what is a title commitment? What is that?
Well, a title search is done, and then a title commitment is like a title binder that shows the title insurance,
Right.
or for the title insurance for the lender's policy or
Right.
the owner's policy.
Okay, so let's back up a second. So what is a title search? How does that work?
Well, title search is where your settlement office, who is going to conduct the closing, sends an abstract or title examiner.
Right.
It used to be to the courthouse, but now it can all be done online. And that title examiner searches the property, starting with the property address, and goes back in time
In the land records.
in the land records to
Yep.
see what is recorded.
Right. So you start with a title search, and then you get a title report
Yes.
from the abstractor.
That's correct.
And then you get it. And now it's interesting from my builder perspective, I don't care about the title binder. And it's funny when we tell people how to go through the process and they're working with a title company that doesn't really understand what we're doing. We get title binders all the time. And as a builder, we want to see the title report so we can have an engineer review it for easements. So tell me again what the title, so you're going to get the title report, and then from a real estate transactional perspective, when you're buying an existing home and you're not tearing it down and you're not building a new home, you are providing really you want to provide a title commitment to make sure what?
Well, with a title commitment, that is the outline for us as the settlement office to see what needs to be done to pass on good and clear title to the purchaser.
Right.
So a title commitment would list if there's a mortgage on the proproperty
Right.
that the seller has, or an unreleased mortgage that should be taken care of, an equity line that needs to be paid off for the seller. It also show if there's IRS liens or judgments. It also contains easements.
Right.
Okay, and that's
Right.
what
So in your prototypical real estate transaction, you're mainly looking at the financial liens that are tied to that property through the land records.
we're looking to see what needs to be done to pass on good and clear title to the buyer, and to make sure that the title insurance underwriter, let's say Chicago Title, First American, Fidelity, is going to insure this property.
Right.
For the lender, if there's a lender involved in the transaction, and also for the buyer for an owner's title insurance policy.
Gotcha. Okay, so now, from a builder perspective, so if somebody wants to tear down a house and build a new home, or if they're buying vacant land, what kind of easements have you seen in, or what kind of easements should the buyer be looking for?
Well, what the buyer should ask for is to see a copy of the title binder as well as all of the background documents. Just like you say for your builders, you look at the documents.
Right.
And the documents would show the easements, detailing what an easement is, having plats attached to that. And then that information, they will see what they can do or cannot do with their property.
Right.
What we also recommend is, if say it's a feasibility study, not only to request a full title search.
Right.
And when I say that, I mean going back 60 years.
So what do you prototypically get if you're not doing a full title search?
If you're not doing a full title search, and we only do full title searches in my office here, you would get what is called a two-owner search.
Okay.
So the title examiner for the settlement office is only going back two owners or two transactions. So that could be from, let's say, 2019 was the last one. Prior to that was 2017. So you're not going back very, very far.
Right.
Where the interesting easements, I'll call them, are kind of hidden back, sometimes in the 50s or the 60s, when the property was a full farm.
Right. So what kind of easements do you prototypically come across?
It matters where the property is, but if it's, let's say, it's going to be a transaction where someone's building on an acre, 2 acres, 5 acres, we see such things as horse trail easements.
Right.
Colonial pipeline easements. One that I had in Great Falls was a landscape easement. So what could a landscape easement be? Well, what it was is the property was a farm. Family owned it. They kind of split it up with all the brothers. One brother owned one lot. I'll call him brother one. Brother two owned the lot behind.
Right.
And brother number one got a full landscape easement on the brother two's property, which meant he could plant, it was put in writing, could plant sunflowers, corn, and anything he wanted on the whole width of the property and going back 100 feet. And what happened in that transaction was we notified the buyer about that.
Right.
And what happened was you couldn't see any easement being used at all.
Right.
Buyer said, it's okay, there's nothing there, it's never going to happen.
Right.
So what happens 2 years after settlement, brother number one starts planting the corn.
Yep.
It doesn't look pretty.
Yeah.
Buyer very upset. Buyer gets ready to sue his real estate agent.
Right.
Agent comes to me and says, thank goodness that you had the buyer sign off at closing a copy of that easement and gave him the title binder, and he's walked away and he's not going to sue me.
Right.
So that's things that we see.
Right. So let's talk about the horse trail. So you buy
Yes.
5 acres in Great Falls and you're sitting out on your backyard and you've been there for 3 years and there's a horse trail easement through your backyard. What can happen?
Well, the horses and the riders can start walking through the property. And it's usually where we see this is at the very back of the property. A lot of times out in Great Falls, their fence is up. So
Right.
it doesn't even look like you have a horse trail easement on your property.
Right.
And so you really need to know what's going to be going through your backyard, whether or not you're going to have to remove a portion of your fence so that the horses and the riders can continue down the trail.
Right. So another way to look at an easement is it's not really your property. That piece of your property that has a horse trail easement on it belongs to the horse riding club or whoever is filed the easement. Is that the right way to say it? Or
I would look at it as someone has the right to use the property that you own, and they have a special use that they can use it.
And you can't
cannot
stop
them.
yeah.
And the easement just doesn't go away because you don't want it there.
Right.
So it stays there because it's in the chain of title.
Right. Okay. So a lot of the things that we come across very often in Arlington and Montgomery County, and I know you don't practice in Maryland, but we come across utility easements very often, which folks don't necessarily realize how they impact the buildability. Yes. So if you have a 50-foot wide lot and you have a 10-foot utility easement, whether there are any utilities in that easement or not, you cannot build into that easement.
That's correct. And we see a lot of problems like that where there might be a utility line where if you're going to put a large home, you're not going to be able to do that because of where the utility easement runs.
Right.
When that happens, there's sometimes we see where people try to vacate that easement, meaning take it away and change the location of the easement so the home could be built. But that's a long process, and sometimes it's not able to do that.
Right. And I think what we're getting at here is easements are very complicated.
Yes.
They are very complicated. And at Stanley Martin Custom Homes, we have a process to manage all that. And I'll talk about that later. But a lot of folks think you can look at a piece of property with your eyes and understand what it is. One of my most interesting cases that I ever came across was we had a buyer in Fairfax City had bought a property that she intended to build on. and she bought the home, but she wasn't going to be able to build for a few years. So when she came to us 4 or 5 years after she bought the home and she'd been living in it, we noticed that her property was actually two separate parcels. And we asked her, we said, well, why is it two parcels? And she said, oh, well, at one point there was a railroad easement across the back of my property long time ago, and the railroad never used it, so they eventually gave the easement, the property, back to the owners, but it came back as a separate parcel. So we went to Fairfax City with her, and it turns out that Fairfax City was going to make her, they call it a subdivision process, to actually assemble the two lots back together. And it took her about 2 years to go through this process to assemble the two lots together so it was now one lot, because if she hadn't done that, she would have only been able to build on the front part of the lot. So I think that's one of my favorite stories because it's pretty easy to understand. But do you have any stories of things that have happened to folks with easements that are interesting to you?
If we could write a book or have a reality show of what we've seen, nobody would believe it.
Yes.
But we do see the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Right.
One that comes to mind right away is what happened out in Great Falls. And I have to say, when I tell you these stories, it's not like it happens every day. I've done probably over 10,000 closings, so these are just like the bad ones.
The one percenters.
But most are really good because everyone does their homework all the way through.
Right.
And it sounds like you do as well, so
Right.
thank you for doing that. It was a situation where two houses next to each other in Great Falls, and the property that we were going to go to settlement on had a pool. And the buyers very happily wanted to get a survey done. Survey was done, and their pool was 10 feet over the property line onto the neighbor's property. And you say, how can that happen? Didn't the pool company have somebody check and do a survey? And what had happened was the pool company did have a surveyor go out, but the surveyor used the wrong rebar or corner markings.
Right.
And so it looked like it was on this property, but it was not. So everyone was up in arms, like, how is this going to be resolved? And the buyer said, what's going to happen? Is someone going to chop up my pool? I'm buying this house for X amount because
Right.
I want that pool. Worked out because the listing agent on the property where we were doing the settlement happened to be best friends with the mother of the owner next door.
Wow.
And the two mothers talked, and the next door neighbor said, okay, this is what we'll do. We will give you an easement for 2 years to keep your pool there. We want to be released of all liability of whatever happens with this easement.
Right.
And then you need to move your pool. And the buyer said, okay, well, we want to enlarge the pool anyway. We agreed to it and went to closing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yes.
So nobody realized the pool was built
No.
into the neighbor's yard.
Because the surveying company used the wrong rebar that was cemented into the ground. So we always like to find out why that happens. Like, how
Yeah.
can you miss something like
So
that?
how
The
did that
rebar is the
happen?
corners. What happened was there was a rebar that was just put in the middle of the property as a site rebar, not as a corner marking.
Yeah, what do they call that? They call that a
There's
location. Yeah.
Locations, yep.
Yep. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see those little location markers sometimes in the middle of a street, a little orange tag, and that's how the surveyor remembers where he set up his gear
And
to
it was
mark
just
the
left-
property
and
line.
It was left there, and that's what the pool surveyor is.
Wow, that's crazy. So, what other information can you share with us on easements?
It's as we were talking, it's always good to get a full title search. If you're getting ready to buy a home or have a feasibility study,
Yep.
please do the feasibility study.
Right.
What I'm starting to see in this market, which is a very fast-moving market, that we are seeing buyers put in contracts saying they want a feasibility study. And they'll have it for 10 days. But it's more of a cooling off period where they
Right.
don't know whether or not they want to buy the home or not.
Right.
And they do nothing during the feasibility study.
Yep.
No survey, no full title search. They
Yep.
don't talk to a civil engineer or a builder. And then they decide, I want to buy this property. The feasibility study expires, they buy the property, and then they realize they can't do what they want to do with the property.
Right. I unfortunately meet a lot of people like that.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think another interesting thing is with the feasibility study, a lot of people will get a 45-day feasibility study, and then they call me and they say, oh, I have a property under contract. I've got a feasibility study. Can you help me get it done? Great. When does it expire? Oh, I've got 10 days left, and that's really borderline not enough time to get a feasibility study, because when we do a feasibility study, we have to get the full title report, which usually takes how long does it normally take you to get a full title?
In this market, I'd say about a week or more. I mean, if needed, we could speed it up in 24 hours.
Right.
But not only the title search, but you want to get a survey or have the engineering company go out and get the survey.
Right.
And with this market being so busy, there's a lot of backlog.
Yeah, there is. So, in a cool market, it would take 3 days, right?
Yeah.
To get a title search back or a title report back. Now it's taken about a week. I
A
agree.
week, 2 weeks.
Yeah, and then from a builder perspective, we want to get that full title report over to an engineer, so an engineer can review it, and the engineer may find something in there. I maybe 90% of the time nothing comes up. Maybe 10% of the time the engineer says, "Hey, there's some things in here that's kind of above my pay grade, and you may want to have an attorney look at this." So then you have to have time to get it to an attorney and have the attorney review it. So there's a lot of things that you need to do with that title report, and it's nothing you can see. There's nothing on the land that shows up at all. It's all in the legal documents behind that property.
That's true.
Right.
And not only have the title work, but getting that survey. Sometimes it's easier to see what's going on with a blank property where you see where the surveys are.
Right.
So what we do is when we get the title work in, if we know someone's going to get ready to buy or build or maybe put a pool in the backyard, we always ask, why do you want the survey? They say, we're going to put a pool. So then we ask the surveyor to locate all of the easements on the property to see whether or not the pool can actually fit where the buyers want it to fit.
Right.
And that is not just a typical survey, that is an added survey service,
Right.
but our surveyor will do that.
Right. Now, I will say I absolutely agree that everybody should get a survey, but I also know that a lot of our new home buyers that want to build on vacant land, a lot of them don't want to spend the money up front because they're going to have to pay for the survey when they get their grading plan prepared and their topography survey when you get all that. So a lot of times they'll push that off until later. But best practice is absolutely to get a survey, but I know not everybody does it.
And you're absolutely right. I'd say when someone's just taking raw land, they're going to build a home, they have a builder helping them. We usually say, who are you going to be using for that? And have the civil engineers get involved and just give them all the information instead of paying for 2 surveys. Because
Right.
it's a waste. If it's a resale property, we can order the survey, we know what's going on. But when there's someone else involved, it's probably better to have it done one time
Right.
with the civil engineers in that whole group.
Right. So at Stanley Martin Custom Homes, we would normally have the engineer who's doing all the engineering review the title report. They wouldn't necessarily prepare the survey up front, but they're looking at everything and they're going to notify us about any easements or other encumbrances that might be in the way. So that's a kind of like a half survey without actually going out and doing the field work.
And look at it, it's like that's a foundation because everything that is needed is right in the title search. Whether or not you need to see it on the survey is one thing, but when you have all that work, that's more than half. That's the whole battle
Right.
there.
And I would say, for the folks listening, when you get a survey in your hand, the first thing I look for on a survey is a line that I see all the time. And it says, this survey was prepared without the benefit of a title report. And if you see that on a survey, that tells you right away that whatever easements are recorded on that property are probably not documented on the survey.
That is true, because what the surveyors normally do is they just go ahead and look at the recorded plat.
Yes.
And there can be a lot of, we call them hidden easements.
Yes.
Prior to that, after that. And so when we know and we ask, like, what are you using the survey for? Then we can assist by adding or having the surveyor add the easements on there.
Right. So it's really tricky. It's really
Yes.
tricky.
Yes.
And, if you're working with professionals, you're in good hands. Your real estate professional is going to help you through this. Your title company is going to help you through it. But I think the bottom line for the topic here on surveys is you really have to know what you're looking at. You really have to know what documents were used when the survey was prepared. And if you see that line on a survey that says this survey was prepared without the benefit of a title report, it's not really going to tell you if there are any easements in the property. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say, except for anything maybe like utilities that may have been recorded with the plat.
Right.
But you're right, to be on the safe side, because once you're spending all this money to build a home, you don't want to have something as an easement in a place where you can't build. And we see that.
Yeah.
We see that.
Yeah, and I would add also, even if you're not planning on building a home, you don't know when you sell that home one day, is some future buyer going to want to tear it down? I think you should at least be aware of what the parameters are within your property.
Yes, and that will help you when you sell later, because if you say, oh, I don't care that there's a horse trail easement in the backyard, but then you try to sell the home and someone says, I don't want that, just keep that in mind.
Right. Good.
But the good news with the horse trail easements, they're usually at the very back
Right.
in a country setting, and a lot of people want to have homes so they can just take the horses and ride the trails.
Right. You may have a horse yourself and you want to use the trail. Right. Not a big deal. All right. We're going to take a quick break and then we're going to be back more with Teresa Schudel. A lot of folks think that building a custom home is a complicated and arduous process. It doesn't have to be. At Stanley Martin Custom Homes, we have the process down to a science. We will bring you through the buying, design, and building phase one step at a time. Head on over to webuildonyourlot.com and check us out. Reach out to us if you want to get started on the path to your very own Stanley Martin custom home. All right, so we are back with Teresa Schudel. Teresa, thank you again for coming in today. Really appreciate you taking time.
Oh, I love being here. Thank you, John.
Thank you so much. So we're talking about easements today, and let's talk about a couple of other things that may come up. And I think, especially in Arlington, one of the things you and I have talked about offline are the common driveways that are very common in Arlington. So what happens? And this is not exclusive to Arlington, so I just want to make sure I'm clear there. So what happens when you have a driveway or a common driveway easement? How does that work?
Well, with a common driveway easement, it's like a shared driveway where more than one property gets to use the driveway to get in and out of their home.
Right.
Where these common driveway easements, sometimes they're easements, where they have like a maintenance agreement. So everybody who has the right to use that common driveway knows who's responsible for snow removal, re-asphalting the road, and how you maintain it. I will say in a lot of transactions we see, there's common driveways on the plat,
right,
but with no explanation, no recorded easement talking about how to maintain.
Right.
And in those situations, sometimes we hear of issues where there might be one neighbor of 5 on the driveway who says, I'm not going to do anything. You want to re-asphalt this or remove the snow, the rest of you pay.
Right.
So it's very good to know up front that you have a common driveway. And normally, as we're talking about whether or not you walk the property, normally you can tell when you go to the property and you have to go 5 deep to get into your driveway, that there is something shared there.
Yeah, and they're also called a pipe stem.
Pipe stem, yes. Very common pipe stem.
Yeah, yeah. So that's when you have a public road, and then you have what looks like a driveway, and you go up this driveway, and there's 4 houses back there.
Yes, and that pipe stem or common driveway is a private roadway.
Right. And so as a real estate professional, I've seen many of these over the years, and sometimes you come across one that's just completely destroyed and falling apart. And that's usually because you have somebody that won't participate in the maintenance. So then everybody says, well, I'm not going to pay extra because this person's not paying. So that can be an uncomfortable place to be. Yeah. So are the common, so that's an easement.
Yes.
Okay.
Recorded.
And then there's a document that you would get from the title report that would explain how that would work.
You hope.
Yeah.
Because some of these older common driveways or pipe stems, there's nothing recorded. It's just on like when the subdivision was formed.
Yes.
Showing the public road and then showing the pipe stem.
Right.
And the shared driveway, as we call it, but with no other verbiage of how it's maintained.
A maintenance agreement. So what you hope to find in the land records is some kind of a maintenance agreement that at least calls out what everybody's responsibility is.
That's correct.
Right. And then if somebody doesn't pay, the rest of the folks can pay and then potentially lien the other party's home.
That's correct.
And then when that party sells their liened home, that lien will come up in the title search.
And has to be paid off in order for that homeowner to sell the property.
Right. So that is a great example of how this whole thing works full circle.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Another interesting thing that comes up often, Teresa, is that there are sometimes if you have water, a creek or a stream or something like that in your backyard, you can have an RPA easement. So that's another item that an engineer would discover. It may not necessarily be in the title search, but a good, well-qualified engineer will find that information in the public records. So there are another interesting easement that you came across one time. Tell me about what a builder did.
Oh, okay. There was a situation where we did the title search and an easement came up, And the easement was, I call it a swap easement, where property number one had an easement on that property from property number two, where nothing could be built in the backyard of property number one. Property number two, also put up by the same builder, had an easement saying that nothing could be put up in their backyard.
Right.
So I asked the builder why. And the reason is that these were smaller lots, and they wanted to have the people be able to look out their kitchen window in the back and not see a tennis court with lights on or a swimming pool for the neighbors, and just keep it as an open space. So this builder decided this was the best way to have open space forever with a recorded easement.
Right, unless both parties agree to vacate the easements.
Yes, and if both parties agreed to vacate the easement, they of course would have to go to a real estate attorney.
Right.
Because if there is a loan on the property, the lenders have to sign off, the lenders' trustees.
Yes.
And it's a whole list of signatures that have to
We've already agreed that's a whole nother episode.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Right. So I keep coming back to, folks are looking at a house and they're walking through the house and they love the backyard and they say, oh my gosh, I'd love to put a pool out there one day. And if you don't do the title search and you don't have somebody review it, you would never know that was there. So if you just follow standard operating procedure and you're working with your real estate professional and you're working with a title company, you're going to issue a title binder, but you're not going to necessarily dig into that easement and notify the seller, would you? Or how would you handle that as a standard operating procedure?
We see the title search, we see the easements. The binder is given to the purchaser if they'd like to see it.
Right.
But as the role as a settlement office, our role is to go over the contract and just make sure that all the terms are met. We don't then, go to land use for Fairfax County for a buyer or find a civil engineer for them.
Right.
That's something that they need to do on their own. So it's very important for a buyer who's interested in doing something like this to have the best team available.
Right.
Especially when you talk about the builder and the civil engineer.
Right.
And a survey.
Yeah, or even if you're not building, so
Yes.
so I think to me that's where I think most people kind of get disappointed in life is because they think they've hired the right real estate professional. They get the title search, they've got the title binder, they go to settlement, and then 5 years later they want to put the pool in, and all of a sudden they realize there's this easement, and they're like, why didn't anybody tell me? And I would say there's a step kind of missing in that having somebody review that title report for you who is either a real estate attorney who you're hiring specifically to review the title report, or have an engineer prepare a plat with the benefit of a title report.
Absolutely.
And I think that's probably the easiest way to go.
I think doing your homework before you need to do the homework is the best thing to do.
Yeah. So is there anything else you can think of that we should add to the conversation about easements that we haven't mentioned yet today?
I would say just know your property, and by knowing your property, get the best team together to help you. Go to the experts, get the title search done. Let your settlement office know what you want to do with the property or what you plan on doing, thinking of doing in the future.
Right.
And then get the homework done, get all the title search done, and have your good team.
Right. And I would say if you're in doubt, consult a real estate attorney. And
Absolutely.
Just run it by them. If I think a lot of folks buy a house and they're going to live in it for a long time. Just you get caught up in the excitement of the transaction. There's a million things coming at you all at once. I find a lot of people can't really think clearly because they're getting a lot of new information and a lot of new terminology that they've never had before, and they get overwhelmed. And then unfortunately, I meet way too many people that have bought a property that they can't do what they want to do with it. So
and that's very disappointing.
It
Just
is.
surround yourselves with the best team you can get.
Absolutely. So in summary, from my perspective, and Teresa's giving you this perspective of the global buying community. My perspective, obviously, is from building a new home. We always advise people to get the full title report. If you're working with Stanley Martin Custom Homes, we're going to get that title report over to one of our engineers. There are different levels of quality of engineers, so we only use really reputable firms. We want to have it reviewed to make sure you're protected before you buy the property. So Teresa, tell us a little bit about RGS Title. And I know you don't like making sales pitches. I know you well enough to know that.
You know me well enough.
I do know you. So, but tell us a little bit about RGS Title and what makes your company so great.
Well, thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Sure.
I'll go way back to when RGS Title was was owned by me and a number of partners.
Yeah.
And then we did sell the company. And the company now is owned, and I'm very happy to say, we're part of the Berkshire Hathaway family. And so we have that strength behind us. We are in Mid-Atlantic, a gigantic footprint. In the Virginia area alone, we have over 20 offices. We're in Maryland, D.C., New Jersey, all the way down to southwestern Virginia.
Wow.
So we pride ourselves on doing residential settlements. We do commercial settlements here, at least I do out of the McLean office.
Right.
And we're the largest privately owned company.
So when folks work with RGS, what kind of experience do they have?
Well, with my office, we feel that every transaction is our own. And my staff, most of my staff has been with me over 20 years, which is a long time in this business,
It
or
is.
really in any business.
Yeah.
And when we get a sales contract in, we see who the buyers are and the sellers. We contact their agents if they have agents. So we contact them directly and say, what can we do for you? Is it an estate transaction? Are you going through a divorce for the sellers? What can we do to make this a good experience? And for the buyers, we ask, is this your first purchase? How involved do you want us to be with you in contacting you? Do you want us to just deal with your real estate agent? So every case is its own case.
Right.
Nothing ever gets boring, and we feel like we are the ones in the shoes of the sellers and the buyers, and we want this to be a very positive experience for everybody.
Right. So as a real estate professional, so I've done a lot of real estate transactions over the years. It's very typical for people to not even think about the title company. I'm working with a buyer, we're driving around, and when I used to work with buyers, I would always go over the sales contract with buyers, and I would say, well, we're going to have to choose a settlement company, and they'll say, oh, well, which one do you recommend? And I would say RGS, obviously. And so the point that I would be trying to make with my buyers is that you want to do your research on the title company at the very beginning, because what's going to happen is you're going to get in a situation where you're writing a contract and you're not going to have time to start calling title companies and finding out what their fees are. So people can call you in advance, right? And ask you, how does the process work? How much do you charge? Well, I mean, what kind of information would you recommend that a prospective buyer would ask a title company?
I think, John, you're absolutely right to do the homework before you need to have a title company. And so what we would do is we would walk through the process with the potential purchaser. We'd give our fees. We'd also give estimates for them. So if they're looking at house prices, let's say, in this market right now, it's $1 million
Sure.
to maybe $1.3 million with the escalation clauses.
Sure.
Giving them what the fees would be, the recording fees, so they have all their information up front.
Right.
Because you're right, no one has time to say, who am I going to go to settlement with when you're trying to negotiate a contract?
Right.
We've been in business for over 30 years, so we do not disappear overnight,
Yeah.
meaning we are here at all times, even after the transaction.
So one of the things that is going to happen for everybody who's out there getting into a transaction, when you get a contract ratified, you are going to be, if you're building a new home, you're going to be in the middle of getting through your feasibility study. You're going to be reading title reports, talking to engineers. You're going to be talking to soil scientists. You're going to get all this stuff that you've never been through before, and you're not absolutely going to have time to figure out which title company you want to settle with. So it is really, really important, whether you're buying, even if you're buying a regular home that you're not tearing down that you want to live in, now you're dealing with home inspections and appraisals, and you're dealing with your lender. Trust me, your lender will make you nuts. And you do not have time to research title companies. So I think for the folks listening, if you want to learn more about the settlement process and the fees, I would absolutely recommend that you get in touch with Teresa to learn more and do your shopping in advance. And if you get a title company that has fees that are lower, ask Teresa, what's going on with these fees here with this title company? Maybe there's something. What would you do in a situation like that? Do you want me to edit that whole thing out, or
No, that's okay. We like the opportunity to work with all buyers and sellers, and we just ask that they give us a call or even stop by to visit us. We do have potential buyers, especially in the higher end brackets,
Right.
that want to come by and say hello and meet the staff, meet me, see what the office looks like.
Right.
And so we love that opportunity, or just a quick phone call. I mean, we're here to help. We love what we do, and we'd like to work with buyers and sellers.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's a very serious moment when you walk into the settlement room and you have to sit down and settle the transaction. Most of the time, the settlements go very smoothly. But if there are any complications, you want to know who's going to be supporting you and representing you and getting that problem solved. Is that a fair way to say it?
Yes, it is. And we look at as if there are any problems, they're all resolved prior to anybody coming to the settlement table.
Okay.
We like settlements we call not boring, but quiet. Because
Smooth.
when we have real estate agents having to make phone calls, or sellers leaving the room, or buyers upset, means the job has not been done correctly.
Right.
So
Good.
smooth is good.
Smooth is good.
Smooth is good.
All right. So how do we find you?
You can contact me. I can provide my information right now if you'd like.
Sure.
My email address is tschudel@rgstitle.com. That's for Teresa Schudel. Or feel free to give me a call at the office at 703-903-9600.
Yep. And when you call or contact Teresa, make sure you let her know that you heard her on the Go with John show.
Yes, please do.
Fantastic. All right, Teresa, thank you so much for coming in today. Is there anything you want to add, or are we solid?
I think we're great. Thank
Okay.
you.
So, Teresa, thank you for coming in today. We enjoyed having you. And this concludes another episode of the Go with John show. Please go out there and build something extraordinary. We just wrapped up a great conversation with Ray Greenstreet with greenstreetgardens.com. Take a listen to his episode. You're going to really hear how passionate he is about gardening. If you have questions about gardening, send it to inthedirt@greenstreetgrowers.com. If you want to visit his retail website, check him out at greenstreetgardens.com. Ray Greenstreet. Great story, great product, 3 locations, 1 in Maryland, 2 in Virginia. You can find them online. When you get in touch with them over there at Green Street, let them know that you heard them here on the Go with John show.